Yes, sir, I got you. All right, we're in the book of Joel. And just 3 chapters. We'll cover all those tonight, which will be good. Oh, by the way, y'all, I got surgery coming up again. They're going to try me again. And it'll be on February the 20, what is that thing? Well, the last Tuesday of February, okay? So we won't have class that night. Yeah.
Last Tuesday,
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Joel, and let's keep going. This, you'll love tonight's study. You will like it a whole lot. Look here in your notes at the introduction, and I gave you a few more notes than usual tonight for such a small book. But you'll see what we're talking about. When's the last time has anybody read Joel?
Where is Joel?
That's a good question.
right after Hosea.
Yeah. Everybody help you in is after Hosea before Amos.
No.
Find Daniel. That's what you need to do.
I just use the table of contents.
All right, Joel, let's look at this introduction. His name means Jehovah's God, but his birthplace and conditions of his life, we don't know nothing about. We don't, have no idea. The prophet Joel spoke to the southern kingdom of Judah. Remember from last week we talked about that. He makes no reference to the northern kingdom of Israel. It's hard to pin down his exact time because he doesn't mention any other kings or prophets. And most scholars date the book of Joel to 835 BC. Now you're probably thinking, I don't care. Yeah, you do care. I'll show you why. This makes Joel a pre-exilic prophet. Now once again, that means he was preaching to Judah before they were taken over by the Babylonians or the Assyrians. See what I'm saying? So before the invading armies came to these two people, Israel and Judah, this guy was preaching, saying, y'all get right, turn to God, this kind of stuff. Read on. Other pre-exilic prophets include, now what I'm saying here, Joel, the same time Joel was preaching, these guys were preaching too. So you got Joel, Obadiah, and Obadiah is just one chapter. We'll see that in a few weeks. You have Jonah, Hosea, Amos, Isaiah, and Micah. So it's interesting to know that when this guy's preaching his word, these other people also are preaching virtually the same sermon to these two people. Only Obadiah preached before Joel. So interesting to know that. Joel wrote toward his audience about the coming day in which God would judge the people. He compared this devastating judgment to a locust invasion. What a way to compare something to. And he says a whole lot in these 2 chapters, and you'll see it.
Wow.
The prophet warned his hearers that unless they repented of their formalism in worship and turned back to God wholeheartedly, they would be devastated. Now that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
The main thing he preaches about is this. When you worship God, your heart's not in it. And he's saying, if you don't change, judgment's coming. Because God wants your worship to be genuine.
Yeah.
If they repented, God would restore him. Then I have there in the box, other prophets quoted Joel. Now, Joel's just 3 chapters, y'all. It's not a big book, right?
All right.
But look at all the prophets that read the book of Joel, and then they quoted him in their writings. For example, and I have it in Joel 1:15. If you go to Isaiah 13, verse 6, he quotes Joel. One example. In Joel 2:3, if you go to Isaiah 51:3 and Ezekiel 36:35, guess what? Wow. They quote Joel. Isaiah quotes him again, and then Isaiah quotes him, Micah. Amos quotes Joel in Amos 1:2 and Isaiah. Then Ezekiel, Isaiah, and Amos. I think it's just interesting to note that these guys, they read, quote, the writing from Joel, and they're thinking, man, that's really something. It's really incredible. But when they write their book, they quote Joel in their book. Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is to me at least.
Yeah.
Read on in the next bullet. Joel's book is second in the Minor Prophets. You may not realize this, but Joel is actually one of the earliest recorded prophets and the most people and the most people miss because this book comes so late in the Old Testament. But your Old Testament is not arranged chronologically, right? So keep that in mind. And then I wrote, like I told you last week, they're not called minor because they're not important, but because they are short. In other words, when they preached the sermon, here's the way they did it. They did it like this. Here's what I'm preaching. Here's my case. I'm done. They were that quick. Well, then, of course, I put in the notes. Some of you say, yeah, I wish your sermons were more minor. Huh. Just get to the point. Boom, that's we're done with it that way. So when you read these prophets, keep that in mind. I mean, they're not like Isaiah, and they're not like Jeremiah, they're not like those guys, or Ezekiel. They just say, boom, wow, isn't that something? And so tonight you'll see what I'm talking about. So let's look at this, Joel chapter 1. And Joel opens his book with a description of a gigantic locust plague. Now, what a way to I imagine he's preaching a sermon, right? And you listen, and here's what he says, chapter 1, verse 1. The word of the Lord that came to Joel, son of Pethuel. Hear this, O elders, and listen, all inhabitants of the land. Has anything like this happened in your days, or in your father's days? And I wonder what he's talking about. Now, of course, they know, because they have just experienced what he's talking about. So read on. Tell your sons about this. And let your sons tell their sons, and their sons the next generation. So evidently what had happened during Judah during this time is so big that Joel says, can you believe what has just happened? It's absolutely unbelievable. It's such a big deal that you would tell your sons, or your sons would tell their sons, and they'll tell the next generation, because what's just happened in Judah is absolutely out of this world. It would be like us with, say, 9/11. You know, something that big, something that devastating. Well, what happened was a locust plague. Now, you may think about us, oh, what? Now, keep in mind, this is an agricultural society. So when the locusts attacked the agriculture, they say it took 2 years at least to recover. So imagine the stock market in America tomorrow just plunging completely.
Yeah.
And it would take 2 years for it to recover. It's such devastating news, it's such devastating to the economy and to the nation of Judah and also Israel that it takes a long time to get over this. And so Joel was saying, can you believe those locusts? Man, they came in here, and our cows don't have any food, and man, our goats don't have any water, and animals don't have anything to eat, and we don't have anything to eat, and our cupboards are bare. And the reason our cupboards are bare is the locusts ate everything. So keep in mind, it's a big deal during this time. So read on. Then notice let's read. What verse am I on? 4. Okay, verse 3. Tell your sons about it. Let your sons tell their sons, and their sons the next generation. Tell them what? Well, verse 4 tells you. What the gnawing locust has left. The swarming locust has eaten. And what the swarming locust has left, the creeping locust has eaten. How many times have I say locust in this verse? And what the creeping locust has left, the stripping locust has eaten. I mean, that's a lot of times he says locust. Then he says this, you bunch of drunkards, wake up. I guess they got so sad they got drunk. I have no idea. But he says, you bunch of drunkards, wake up. What's going on
That
right here?
screaming locust, the same thing in the King James is palmer worms, what?
Yes.
The King James word.
Yes, same thing. Yeah. And well, all you wine drinkers, on account of the sweet wine that is cut off from your mouth. For a nation has invaded my land. Now, let me give you this backdrop because we're going to get into this word pretty deep. He's saying this. We need to repent. Because here's what he's saying. You see those locusts that just invaded our country? Well, guess what, y'all? There's a nation coming from Babylonia. There's a nation coming from Assyria. And if we do not get right with God, the way those locusts invaded Israel and overtook everything, they will do it. So it'd be like us saying today. Now, it's hard for us to imagine locusts because I can't recall anything. But if it did happen, it would be like the preacher saying, you remember those locusts hit Randolph County and destroyed everything? If we don't get right with God, Russia's coming in. And the way those locusts overtook everything in America, the Russians are coming, and they're going to be upon us as like those locusts were. And so he's giving an illustration. That's what he's doing. And he opens up with saying, look at the locust. Wasn't they something? Yeah. It's really a great sermon. I mean, it's a great, he's very relevant in his times. Did y'all catch those locusts? Yeah. I'm going to tell you something. That's nothing. Because we're so far from God, if we don't repent, the Babylonians, you know those guys over there, the next door to us, they're going to come upon Israel, and they're going to be upon us like those locusts were, and we're going to be destroyed and wiped out. So you would think, well, I should listen. Did they listen? No, they did not. Now, let's see here. So chapter 1, verse 5 through 7, look at this. Awake drunkards, verse 6. For a nation has invaded my land, mighty and without number. Its teeth are the teeth of a lion, and it has fangs of a lioness. It has made my vine waste and my fig tree splinters, and has stripped them bare and cast them away. Their branches have become white. So he's just basically saying in chapter 1, and I won't read any more of that, he's just saying this army's coming in, it's going to be bad news if we don't get right with God. So what does he do? Look at verse 14. We're going to deal with this. He says, consecrate a fast. Wow. Proclaim a solemn assembly. Gather the elders and all the inhabitants of the land to the house of the Lord your God and cry out to the Lord. So here's what he's saying. If we're going to get saved, y'all, here's what we got to do. We're going to have to pray and fast. Hopefully, if you fast and seek God, hopefully he'll relent and judgment won't come and this nation will exist. So on page 2, if you look at page 2 of your notes, I have typed up one whole page on fasting. Now, in 2018, in most churches, and we're guilty too, you hear nothing about fasting.
Right.
What you're about to see is going to amaze you about with fasting, and we'll see we can do different here at Foster Street. Look at these notes. Number 1. First of all, let me ask you this. Why do people fast? Or why do you think the main reason is?
To lose weight.
That is.
Yeah.
Now, that's one of the reasons, Ruth. That's what people think. In fact, if you go to most of the Christian bookstores, they have shelves and it has fasting, but it deals with losing weight. The Daniel fast. Let's lose some weight. Let's do all this kind of stuff. Lose weight. But that's not the biblical reason for fasting.
Right, that's true.
But in America it is,
Yep.
which kind of tells you, think about this, how far we are from God.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
We fast to lose weight. But
I mean,
in essence, what do you think the biblical reason for fasting is?
To cleanse and purify your body and mind.
Yeah, very, very, very good answer. Cleanse and purify your body and mind. Let me ask you some crazy questions. Does fasting give you more brownie points with God? No. How does fasting help you with your walk with God?
Helps you to depend.
Depends. It's a good word.
Close.
Get you closer.
To know where it comes from.
I don't know if I can draw this. I'm going to try to draw a funnel. Well, I ain't gonna draw it. This is my funnel. That's like a mountaintop.
yeah.
That's an upside down funnel. Okay?
That's good enough.
And so basically, that's our walk with God
Yeah.
before fasting. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're not getting much from God in our soul.
Right.
See what I'm saying? Now when we fast, let's turn this funnel upside down. Let's see if I catch my stuff. This is a hard thing. Yeah. Now we are able to receive more from God in our spirit from fasting. But this all comes from fasting. Now, I'll show you what I'm talking about. And this is what it does. Number 1, it's important to remember that we can't earn God's blessings or answers by prayer and fasting any more than we can earn our salvation. So, but there are some people who think this, man, if we just fast, we'll get God's attention. And it's going to be on. No, that's not why you fast. Well, you think, why do I fast then? Of course, the Bible does say this, some things only come about by prayer
Yeah.
and fasting,
Yeah.
right? Fasting doesn't substitute for obedience or personal surrender. We'll go to Isaiah 58 in a few minutes, and they're saying in Isaiah 58, God, haven't you noticed our fasting? We've been fasting so much. But then Isaiah says, yeah, but you're living like hell. That's what he says, basically. And so, yeah, you may be fasting, but your lifestyle is so sinful that God doesn't even recognize your fast.
Yeah.
And so that's what Joel's saying about these, like if they go to church. Yeah, y'all are going to church, but you're not changing.
Yeah.
You're doing the formal ritualism, you're singing the songs, you're hearing the sermon,
Yeah.
but your life has been the same way for 5 years, 10 years, 25 years. And you're in church all the time and you're very religious, but,
It hasn't led to your obedience.
yeah. So that's what they say. However, it is a means of cleansing, what you said, the heart of distractions and help us to have a more receptive frame of mind of what God wants to do in our life and through our prayers. Let me tell you about fasting. Not that I'm an expert. Shameful to say. When I first came here to Falter Street, we did, with the church plant, we fasted every Friday. Or the church did. Every Friday, we fasted. And we told the people, every Friday, this is fasting church. And if you want to come by the church on Friday and seek God, you come. You want to stay at home and seek God, that's fine. But you fast. Elmer Towns is a great writer. He's got a book on fasting. And some of this material I got from that book. And he said from 1841 to 1951, do you want to guess how many books was written on fasting?
2.
0.
Wow.
I got a question.
Yeah.
Do you think the good Lord can force somebody to fast?
Pardon?
The good Lord would force someone to fast?
Force?
Yeah, like not force them, but like make their situation to where you realize that that's really what's happening,
Well, that's
and then your
basically-
upside down funnel is taking place. It's like a, not
Yeah,
really like a
I know what you're
God,
saying.
but like a,
We'll answer that question as we go.
That's
along.
basically what it is right here with these locusts though, isn't it?
Mhm.
it's, yeah, I didn't even think of it
He's trying to
that
draw
way.
them back by starving them out.
Starving, yeah.
Let
like
them realize
God.
what they did have.
Mhm. When we go through this, you'll
Yeah.
get the answer. It'll be like, yeah, that's it, right there.
Cause I was curious.
So, look at number 2. Any other question?
Can it be used to cast out demons? Cause I think.
We'll hit that in a minute too.
Okay.
All right. So what was I say from 1841 to 51, 0 books written on fasting. There are 2 reasons the church today doesn't believe in fasting the way they used to. Number 1, we have got slack, right? Number 2, the society we live in, our society tells you this: you gotta eat.
Upsize it.
Yeah.
Eat like you mean it.
Yeah.
And you gotta eat.
Get up.
If you don't eat, if you don't have your 3 meals a day, if you don't have your 3 meals a day, you'll be in trouble and you'll be sick and you'll have this and you won't be right. And so,
Sure,
go ahead.
I think people nowadays, we as a society, we just don't believe in miracles anymore.
No,
Yeah,
That's
So
true.
Why do all this
you're right.
when we don't expect anything to happen?
Yeah. yeah. We don't, let me keep going now. We don't care.
There are miracles.
Okay, number 2, when should we fast? Now, I'm just gonna read this stuff to you. I'm not gonna elaborate on it. Just here we go. We should fast when searching out essential truths so our understanding is clear. So in other words, when you fast, your mind gets clear,
I've heard that.
a whole lot clearer.
Yeah.
If that's the truth, dear God, I need it every day. Number 2, we should fast when seeking heavenly wisdom that God has promised 3, or third world, I'm just gonna read on. We should fast when seeking God's direction and making important plans. We should fast when dedicating our talents to God's service. We should fast when requesting God's help in a crisis. We should fast with contending with demonic oppression. It's like you was talking about. That's in Mark 5, that talks about that also. We should fast when seeking God for more laborers for the harvest. We should fast for unity among church members. We should fast when seeking heart cleansing and spiritual renewal. We should fast when seeking to overcome spiritual temptation. We should fast when seeking to develop an appetite for plain food. That's all I can say. What's up?
I gotta have some good food.
Well, I guess when you go without anything, without nothing.
Yeah. And what happens, your palate changes and you like it. You don't have to have all the other stuff. You just like it. Last, we should fast when seeking to conquer disease.
Yeah.
And all these are based on scripture that if we ever do a big class on fasting, we'll go in more detail. Number 3. Now remember, I'm covering this because Joel said this, let's fast. All right. In fact, it says later in chapter 2, blow the trumpet, let's declare a fast. That was, have you heard the word shofar? You know how they blow the trumpet shofar, and when they would blow the trumpet shofar in the book of Joshua, it's when they went to battle. Well, Joe was saying, you know how, I'm gonna tell you how much trouble we're in. Get that shofar out and blow that. Not for battle, but for fasting. So he's basically saying, we're in a mess, y'all. So we got to start praying. Now remember, last week Hosea preached this same sermon. No, Amos, we'll see it next week. Amos preached this same sermon as Joe was preaching, and they ran him out of Israel.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear this stuff. And that's why people today in American churches, they want really the Bible really watered down. Don't give me hard truth.
Yeah.
Don't give me something that makes me mad. Don't give me something that offends my lifestyle. That's watered down because, boom, we don't want to hear this.
How did the ACO get in the Bible?
It's not in the Bible.
Yeah.
That's
Like, I'm just.
Yeah. Prayer and fasting should go hand in hand. Prayer is the means by which we grasp the invisible things of God, while fasting is the means by which we let loose and cast away the visible things that we are prone to depend upon. That's a long sentence, but it's a good sentence. We'll read it again. Prayer and fasting should go hand in hand. Prayer is the means by which we grasp the invisible things of God. Now you got to, while fasting is the means by which we let loose and cast away the visible things that we are prone to depend on. You ought to read that a few times to get that right. Let me just move on. Ultimately, the goal of true fasting should be the fulfillment of Isaiah 58. That's where we're at. This is the kind of fast that God's called us to do. Now, on number 4, I'm basically paraphrasing Isaiah 58 to you. Okay? And according to Isaiah 58, this is what happens. This is what will happen in your life if you really fast into the Lord and the funnel happens. See what I'm saying? So when you start fasting, you start seeing things right. You start understanding things right. Fasting does not draw you closer to God. And you're thinking, that sounds so stupid. No, fasting opens your eyes to God, then you get closer to God. See what I mean? So when you fast, basically all the things of this world loses its attraction to you. It's like the time when I went in that spiritual discipline and had to be quiet for 8 hours. Starting off, I hated it. But at the end, I understood. This is absolutely incredible. But it took me time to not use my words to prove myself, to understand stuff. In other words, let me read on. Isaiah 58. This is what fasting would do. God has chosen fast that, and this is in Isaiah 58, that will loosen the bonds of wickedness.
One verse.
It's y'all look it up. It's
Okay,
there,
okay. Oh, I thought you was,
No,
Read word for word.
I'm just paraphrasing this one.
Okay.
It will undo heavy burdens. Now, when you do fast, you know what happens? In fact, when you do any of the spiritual disciplines, and the church doesn't know much of the spiritual disciplines. We did a class on spiritual disciplines 2 years ago here. Spiritual disciplines are such things as this, and they're all in the Bible, and Jesus did them all too. Solitude, that's a spiritual discipline. What's that mean? So you just get alone by yourself and be quiet. You know what I'm talking about? Prayer, of course, is a spiritual discipline. Silence, it's a spiritual discipline.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's like 12 or 14 spiritual disciplines. Worship is a spiritual discipline. Now, when you do the spiritual disciplines, they make you mad.
Mm-hmm.
They make you very uncomfortable. They make you grumpy. They really do. You're so ill when you do the spiritual disciplines because you understand I'm losing control. But by doing the spiritual disciplines like fasting, being quiet, that kind of stuff, you understand, well, it's not, you understand, yeah, I'm really getting better because now I'm giving control over to God. So the funnel gets big. See what I'm saying? Up until that time, you are at the wheel. But when you do the fasting or the disciplines, you let go of the wheel and you give it to God. But in that process, you're very grumpy because you want to be in control. So the disciplines, fasting helps you to see God better and hear God better. But in doing that, starting off, you're very grumpy. And that's why we don't do them all. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It will loose the bonds of wickedness. It will undo heavy burdens. It will let the oppressed go free. It will break every yoke. It will give bread to the hungry, provide poor with housing. It will allow people's light to break forth like the morning. In other words, things you haven't seen. Why can't I see this? Why doesn't God answer this prayer? God, why aren't you doing anything? God, why don't you move? There it is. I see it now. You understand? It will cause their health to spring forth speedily. It will cause their righteousness to go before them. And it will cause the glory of the Lord to be their reward or their rear guard. That's the fast of Isaiah 58. Read on. In most cases, fasting is a private matter between the individual and God. Go to Matthew 6. Interesting thing here. Are y'all with me tonight?
10-4.
Okay. In Matthew 6, of course, it's the Sermon on the Mount, right? Well, he deals with, in Matthew 6, 3 things pretty pointedly. Number 1, in verse 6, chapter 6, he's dealing with giving, right? So when you give to the poor, verse 2, do not sound a trumpet before you. In other words, look what I'm doing, y'all.
Yep.
You don't let your right hand know what you're doing.
Yep. Right.
But then he talks about in verse 5, prayer. And then he talks about fasting. So in chapter 1, verse 1 through verse 24, he talks about 3 things. He talks about prayer. He talks about giving. He talks about fasting. And those were the 3 things that the religious people, Pharisees, did in order to be seen by people. And if you look at verse 16, whenever you fast, do not put on a gloomy face,
Yeah.
as the hypocrites do.
Yeah.
So what they would do,
Yeah.
I think I have I don't have any notes. The Pharisees would fast twice a week, And they would fast on Monday and I think Thursday. And the reason they would fast on Mondays and Thursdays, it was the busiest days that people were in the marketplace. And so they would fast on those 2 days. And when they would fast, you know, Jesus says, when you fast, don't be gloomy. They would announce it. Just want you to know, dear God, I'm fasting today. And they would put on a gloomy face, and they would do the very same thing with giving. And Jesus saying, you've got your reward. Right?
Yeah.
So he says, now when you give, do it in secret. When you fast, do it in what? Secret. When you pray, do it where?
In your closet.
In your closet, or do it in secret. Because
Yeah.
he's saying this. This is not to be something that you brag about, that you talk about, because when you brag about it and talk about it, you want glory.
That's right. That's
Now,
true.
you may not say you don't want glory, but the reason you're talking about it, you want people to notice you. And he says, you got your reward, and it's from people. But your Father in heaven is not going to reward you.
Nope.
Can I get on my high horse?
Go ahead. Ride that horse. Hey.
And this might be a conviction of mine. So, when I say, that's fine. That's fine.
So sorry.
You're fine, Stella. When I say this, if I'm not right, feel free really to say, Charles, that's not right. Because I could very well be wrong. Okay? So correct me. I want you to correct me. I'm asking for it. How can I say this? People ask me all the time, well, why don't you allow us to broadcast stuff at Foster Street that we're doing and let people know the money we give, the things we do, the people we help out? This is for Jesus. I don't want people to know. Now, if you want to come to me one-on-one, I'll tell you. But I don't want to get on Facebook and say, hey, we've done this.
Watch it.
Well, there are your rewards and given by people. You do things. We, one year we gave out like 200 turkeys. And my professor in seminary said, anyway, he knew, okay? He was testing me. He said, did y'all put it on Facebook? Did you call the news department? I said, no. He said, thank God. He said, finally someone who did something and didn't broadcast it all over America and all over Facebook for somebody to see something.
Right.
He did it for the right motive.
All right.
And I think a lot of things that we do, it's in us to say, man, look what we're doing. It's so incredible, it's so phenomenal. And all it is, y'all, you want pat on the back.
Yep.
You want it real bad. Look what we've done. Look what we're doing. Look what we're helping. And
Yeah.
Jesus says, read. If you don't believe me, read Matthew 1 through 34. Right, 1 through 24. And he'll tell you. You can do that if you want to, but your reward is on earth.
Yep.
But in heaven, it's no credit. Now, I'm not saying you can't do it, but I'm just saying that's me. And I could be wrong. Big time. Because he says, you know, when you pray, don't get in front of people and say, well, thank God I'm going to pray a lot today. Glory to God. I'm going to pray about little God. He said, no, don't secret. Don't secret. Do this kind of stuff. When you give, you know, don't give in front of people. When you fast, don't do this. And see, that's, if we do it, they did it. And that's why he rebuked them so hard. You're doing it because of your own righteousness. What do you think, y'all?
But it's okay to fast as a church?
A corporate fast. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, a corporate fast. And we'll deal with that. All right. Number 5, in most cases, not all cases.
Oh,
Okay?
I could have kept my mouth shut to that.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Read on.
In most cases, fasting is a private matter between the individual and God.
Mm-hmm.
But however, like in Joel here,
Right.
Joel pronounces a national fast, you see. 6, more than any other discipline, fasting reveals the things that control us. You'll see right off, man, good point. And you'll just, I'm controlled by this. Never.
What are you allowed to, can you like drink coffee or water? What's fasting?
And how long?
The typical fast, maybe we ought to do a class on this and this kind of stuff. The typical fast is, there's so many fasts, but one of them is you make the call,
Oh,
okay? Now, usually it's just water, okay?
Yeah.
just water.
Only Jesus, he fasted 40 days and 40 nights, nothing.
Wow.
He had water, he didn't say he was thirsty, he said he was hungry, he didn't say he was
Yeah.
thirsty. Notice that.
My mother-in-law used to fast, and she would do it 3 days at a time.
Mhm.
And sometimes she, it's no certain days. I don't think you need a certain day
No,
to
you don't.
fast.
You don't.
But I would see her out at the big oak tree down on her knees,
Mhm.
praying.
Read on, number 7. The early church. Now, when I say the early church, I'm talking about the church in AD 60, 70, 80, like Pentecost church, that church, the early church. Encouraged 2 days a week for fasting. They just expected you to fast. And usually, in the early church, fasted on Wednesdays and Fridays. It was expected. It wasn't like, okay, we got to set a day up. No, the early church fasted every Wednesday and every Friday, all the time. John Wesley, know him?
Yep. Oh, yeah.
You know,
Oh, yeah.
believed so strongly about fasting that he refused to ordain anyone in the Methodist Church who did not fast on those 2 days. No one did. Now, once again, you don't hear that talk today.
Wow.
When did that stop?
About 1841. Yeah,
So it's been a while.
yeah.
But if it's something you're supposed to do, if it's something that you're expected to do, don't it become ritualistic though?
It did with the nation of Israel because
Yeah.
it didn't match their obedience. People still fast today for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
But
But we'll hit that in a minute though too, what you just asked. Okay. Yeah. Does somebody say something?
I was gonna say, fasting is not always with food.
No, it's not.
I've heard that.
I fast 2 days a week, I don't work.
That's what I'm doing. When I first got saved,
That's my mother.
when I first got saved, this guy that was like my mentor, he said, Charles, we're going to pray and we're going to fast sleep. I said, fast sleep? He said, yeah. And so he made me. We stayed up 24 hours, stayed up all night
Wow.
praying. And I thought, he says, we're fasting sleep to pray. I
Wow.
said, I'm not good at this. And I can remember y'all. I do remember. He was saying, now y'all pray. And I thought, oh, I'm one of the disciples. I
was
remember
gonna
y'all.
say.
I remember I was on the floor. And I was like this. And I was falling, and I fell asleep. And I woke up. Yeah, Lord. Yeah, Lord. Yeah,
Good thing you don't snore.
Lord. Yeah.
But you know, I've
The
heard,
words.
Yeah.
I've heard fasting is to show your dependence on God too. I mean, you had to
Yeah.
depend on God about the
Let me
sleep.
show you this, the last thing, we're gonna hit some more stuff. Here in the little box. Fasting in the biblical sense is choosing not to partake of food because your spiritual, this is quite a quote.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
listen to this. Fasting in the biblical sense is choosing not to partake of food because your spiritual hunger is so deep,
Wow.
your determination and intercession so intense, or your spiritual warfare so demanding that you have temporarily set aside even fleshly needs to give yourself to prayer and meditation. That's what I quote.
Yep.
So this guy's saying your love for God's so strong, and your burden for someone you're praying for is so intense. You're thinking about them only, and you don't want food. You really want to see God in prayer for that person. Now, when you get that way, You don't want food.
Dude, I have so much guilt on me right now.
Well, but don't let it be the wrong guilt, okay? You gotta watch where that guilt comes from, Ruth, okay? But,
Yeah.
So, but you know, that's the stuff. When you see that, you see the early church. And that answers your question. It was not a ritual. Their love for God was so strong. They didn't want food.
Yeah.
Well, we don't need it. And we're going out here to get killed maybe by the lions and everything else, but that's okay. We're in love with God. Now, the church is so far from that. It's absolutely unbelievable. Because now the church has to entertain people to keep
Yep.
people happy.
Yep.
Back then, you didn't have to entertain nobody. You served God because, well,
That's right.
you served God, you could have a noose around your neck. You
We
served God
have
because
to, or
you're
we've
right.
chosen to over the years.
Oh, the church has both. How's that? You would have to both. Right there. All right, now, let's move on, because we've got some more good stuff to show you. We go. All right. But this morning, fasting is such a big part of the book of Joel. I mean, if you read Joel, it will take you just 10 minutes to read. Okay? But if you read Joel, you'll see it through there all the time. Fast, fast, fast. So go back to Joel. We'll wrap this up. Okay, verse 14. Finally got back. Consecrate a fast. Proclaim a solemn assembly. Gather the elders, all the inhabitants of the land, to the house of the Lord your God, and cry out to the Lord. So you see, all of a sudden, this fasting now makes sense. When you get this backdrop on fasting. Okay, then I see what they're doing here. Alas for the day of the Lord is near. And when he says day of the Lord, he's saying, boys, I'm telling you, judgment's coming. You better get right. It's coming around the bend. And it will come as destruction from the Almighty. That's not food being cut off from before our eyes. Now, why is he saying that?
The locust.
The locust. Look at the fields, boys.
Yeah.
Nothing to eat. The seeds shrivel under their clods. The storehouses are desolate. The barns are torn down. The grain is dried up. The beasts are even groaning. That's not a good picture. Because remember, he said, what's going on here? You'll tell your sons. I mean, sons will tell their sons. It's quite a day we got going on right here. And what God's trying to do is trying to show you by these locusts that we don't get right. There's an army coming in like these locusts. It's going to be bad to the bone. So that's the backdrop of Joel. Now, look at verse 18 again, chapter 1. How the beasts groan, the herds of the cattle wander aimlessly because there is no pasture for them. Even the flocks of sheep suffer. To you, O Lord, I cry, the fire has devoured the pastures of the wilderness, and the flame has burned up all the trees of the field. Even the beasts of the field pant for you, and the water brooks are dried up, and the fire has devoured the pastures of the wilderness. So, I mean, we see right here a picture of desolation that has really happened. In your notes, did I put this in there? You look at page 1. Yeah, I did put this in here. Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Back on page 1. Here in the box, right? Here's what he's saying. Here's how he's comparing the locust. So the locust plague is an illustration. Now y'all see that, right? He's using a locust. There's also a warning of a coming judgment. One much more terrible than the locust. Joel says that unless Israel wakes up, God is going to send armies of Babylon into Israel like a horde of locusts. And what he is doing, he is. I don't want to get too deep right here, don't let me move on. He is basically saying that's what sin's done to us. You know how the locust has wiped everything out? That's what sin does to us.
Yeah.
It wipes everything out in our life. We don't see it right off, but over a period of time, it's all like that. Chapter 2. Blow a trumpet in Zion, all right? The day of the Lord is near. Then verse 2 talks about the locust, a day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and thick darkness. There's an army coming down, he says in verse 2. Never seen nothing like it, never will again. And they didn't. Verse 4, their appearance is like the appearance of horses, and war horses, so they run. So he's talking about this army coming in from the north. Verse 7, they run like mighty men, they climb the wall like soldiers, they each march in line, they do not deviate from their paths, they do not crowd each other, they march everyone in this path. When they burst through the darkness, they do not break ranks, they rush from the city, they run on the wall, they climb into the houses, and they enter through the windows like a thief. Before them the earth quakes. So he's saying this, it's going to be bad, y'all. These boys are coming in like the locusts did, they're coming. Now, if we repent, God will save us. Did they repent? No. No. Okay. Verse 11. The Lord utters his voice before his army. Surely his camp is very great. Is for strong is he who carries out this word. The day of the Lord is indeed great and very awesome. Who can endure it? Verse 12 is hope. Yet even now, says God, return to me with your heart. But with what? Fasting, weeping, and mourning. The word mourning there means wailing. So I want your heart, God is saying. Yeah, you're having service. Yeah, you're doing some stuff. But you know what's not in it? Your heart's not in it. Yeah, you read the Sermon on the Mount. Guess what Jesus talks about? Your heart. Because they say, we haven't committed adultery. And God says, oh, but with your heart. We haven't killed anybody. Oh, but if you have hate in your heart, you do it in the heart. So, read on. Verse 13. This is quite a statement on words. Rend your hearts, not your garments. Wow.
Yep.
What's he mean by that?
Do it on the inside, baby.
What did they do when they were really upset?
Tore their clothes.
Tore their clothes. Remember Job? When Job's friends saw Job, what did they do? Tear their clothes. And so it's the custom, and God is saying, I'm tired of seeing you just tear your clothes. And you don't change. Why don't you get your heart changed? I mean, why don't you tear your heart the way you tear your clothes? That's what he's saying. That's what I want to see. And then he gives this promise. This verse, now, here's what's amazing about the Bible. Now, y'all know the Old Testament now, so y'all know this. He is quoting Moses in verse 13. This verse is first found in Exodus, I think, 34. This is after the children of Israel, they come and they make a golden image, and Moses comes down and says, the commandments, he breaks the commandments, and Moses says, let me go wipe them out. And God says, no, I want you to go down there to that camp. I want you to tell them my name. Now, you would think God would say, my name is, I'm kicking your butt. Right? You've had it. My name is, I'm going to zap you, bolt you, you're going to be toast, you're going to be sent, you're not going to, it's all. Notice what he says. Now, return to the Lord your God for what?
He's gracious.
He's gracious.
Yeah.
That's what it says. He doesn't say, I want to kill you. He doesn't say, I want to wipe you out. He says, yeah, you have done everything wrong. You've messed up in everything you've done. But he says, let me tell you something. Be taken who I am. I'm gracious, and I'm full of compassion and loving kindness, and I want to be with you. I want to help you. Quite a statement here in this picture of judgment, isn't it? Big time. I'm slow to anger. I abound in loving kindness. He just doesn't have loving kindness. He abounds in it. And I relent of evil. And who knows, he says. Man, God may have grace on us and let us live. That's what I find it says. So, verse 15, guess what it says again? Blow that trumpet.
Well,
Get the trumpet blowing, boys. Assemble the elders, gather the kids, the infants, let the bridegroom come, let them marry. And basically he says in this chapter, you need to have a fast, you need to pray. Go to verse, you got 10 minutes. Verse 23. Go to verse 22, sorry. Do not fear, beasts of the field. That's funny. God's so concerned, he's even concerned about the animals. See that?
yeah.
For the pastures of the wilderness have turned green, for the tree has borne its fruit. 23, so rejoice, O sons of Zion. Now, when you see the word Zion, Zion also means church, but Zion means this. It's the fellowship of the redeemed. So when it says Zion, Zion means this is the fellowship of the redeemed. Be glad of the Lord your God. Verse 24, their threshing floors will be full of grain, and the vats will overflow with the new wine and oil. Verse 25 is a great verse. Then I will make up to you for the years that the locusts have eaten. Wow. That's a great verse.
Yeah, I like that one.
Yeah, that's really a great verse. God has said, everything you have lost, you know, this great locust just came through, I'll make it up to you. In fact, I'll give you more back. Is there a good example of that in the Bible? Yes. Job, right. Lost everything, but in the end, boom. So God is saying, everything the devil has stolen from you, everything you've given over to the enemy, everything you gave to him, if you turn to me with your heart and you tear your heart and not your clothes, you know what? I'll give you that and so much more you have no idea. Amazing stuff, isn't it? Yeah. Let's see here. Here we go. 5 minutes, is that good? Joel's a good book, isn't it?
Yep.
It is a good boy. Then, verse 28, you've heard this verse. It will come about after this that I will pour out my spirit on all mankind, and your sons and your daughters will prophesy. Your old men will dream dreams, your young men will see visions.
Oh, yeah.
Now, where have you heard that before?
Pentecost church.
Pentecost.
Pentecost.
That was the first sermon
Yep.
preached on the day of Pentecost
Yeah.
by Peter.
Yep.
And Peter quotes the book of Joel.
Yep.
So in the very first sermon on the day of Pentecost, Peter quotes this verse. Right here. So Peter, of course, he was a good Jew. So he knew the Old Testament, he knew the Bible, and he says, boys, right here, the Spirit of God just fell on this place, and it's all what's going on. Read on. Chapter 3. Now, what can I do here to wrap this up? Now, here's what's amazing about chapter 3. Here's what's amazing about the book of Joel. Let me show you. Verse 9. I'm missing a lot out, but where are you? Maybe. Proclaim this among the nations. Prepare a war. Rouse the mighty men. Now, you know what war he's talking about now? The final war. Yes.
Wow.
So in the book of Joel, we have went from something BC. All of a sudden, he's now went to
Something hadn't
the final war.
hadn't even happened yet.
Amazing, isn't it? Read on.
Wow.
Beat your plowshares into swords, and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I'm a mighty man. Hasten and come, all you surrounding nations. Now here's what's going on. God is saying, now y'all, this book shows the sovereignty of God. In other words, it shows God's in charge.
Oh, yeah.
So God knew they're not going to turn. I want them to turn and serve me, but Israel's not.
All right.
So they're going to go into captivity. And so these heathen people will take my people
Wow.
and make rough on them, and make hard on them. And God says, I'm not going to get it. You don't do that to my people. Now, have my people disobeyed me? Yeah, but they're still my people. You think you're going to get by with listening to my people? Yeah, I'm going to get you now. So what he's saying. So, look what he says. Hasten and come, all you surrounding nations. Now he's talking about something yet to come. So he's saying basically this. Okay, Iran. Okay, Iraq.
Yep.
Okay, Russia. Okay, you guys.
Yeah.
You want to turn against Israel? My people?
Yeah. Come on.
Gather yourselves there. Bring down, O Lord, the mighty ones. Let the nations be aroused and come up with the valley of Jehoshaphat. Now, Jehoshaphat, that's where they're going to fight the battle of Armageddon. Jehoshaphat, you know what Jehoshaphat means? The Lord judges. So let's come to my valley. And I'm going to judge you,
Yeah.
nation. All right? For there I will sit to judge all the surrounding nations. Put in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come tread, for the winepress is full. The vats overflow, for the wickedness is great. This is a great evangelism verse, but we misquote it. Look at what it says. Multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision. For the day of the Lord is near in the valley of decision. The sun and moon grow dark, the stars lose their brightness. Now you're thinking, wow, you want to see this verse in action? Go to Revelation 14.
Wow.
Revelation 14, and when I'll read, you'll think, we just read that. You ready?
10-4.
3 minutes. Verse 14. How's that sound? Then I looked, and behold, a white cloud sitting on the cloud was like the son of a man, having a golden crown in his hand, and a sharp sickle in his hand. That's what Joel said about the sickle. And another angel came out to the temple, crying out with a loud voice to him who sat on the cloud, put in your sickle and reap, for your hour to reap has come, because the harvest of the earth is ripe. He's quoting Joel.
Where are you at?
Then he who sat on the cloud swung his sickle over the earth, and the earth was reaped. And another angel came out of the temple. He also had a sharp sickle. Now this is the last battle of Armageddon. Then another angel, and the one who had power over fire, came out from the altar, and he called out with a loud voice to him who had the sharp sickle, saying, put in your sharp sickle, gather the clusters from the vine of the earth, because her grapes are ripe. Now, we're talking about mankind. Y'all do know that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So the angel swung his sickle to the earth and gathered the clusters from the vine of the earth and threw them into the great winepress of the wrath of God. It's the battle of Armageddon, y'all. I mean, it's all these
Yeah.
people going to get killed.
Yeah. Oh,
In
yeah.
fact, it's so bad, here we go, and I'm done.
Yeah.
And the winepress was trodden outside the city. This is the verse that led me to the Lord.
What verse are you?
20. And the winepress was trodden outside the city, and the blood came out of the winepress up to the horse's bridle for 200 miles. So there's a river of blood at this battle.
Wow.
And the blood is the blood of mankind. And the blood is so high that it goes through the bridle of a horse from here to Myrtle Beach, a river of blood for mankind. But it's all the enemies of God that's being killed.
Wow.
Quite a picture in the book of Joel. Who would have thought it?
But you were just reading out of what in Revelation?
Revelation.
Revelation.
Chapter 14.
What is, here, a sickle? What is a sickle? That's something I
The
don't, I've heard that
Grim
word all,
Good way to put it.
a what?
The Grim Reaper thing, the thing you
That's
go
why
up
they
there
used
and
to
get
cut
hay
the
with.
fields, right?
Oh,
Back
okay.
in, see, I'm old enough where I used to sickle growing up, cut the leaves out.
Yeah. I don't know.
Did
Yeah, I always, I've seen that word all, but I don't know what it is.
It's just like this rough thing back and forth, and just cuts the weeds down, and that's all it is.
Or
And so God is
nice.
saying, and basically God is saying this is a gruesome thing we're done. These evil people, here comes an angel with a sickle, I just wipe them out. That's it. Okay, y'all, that's it. Next week is Amos.
Charles, do you have the notes from last week? That's what.
Yeah, Jim's making.
I got some in there.
That's